Okay, let's move on to one of the more interesting trades that happened yesterday. So, James Wiseman, and Sadiq Bey swapped. The Warriors and Pistons they swapped. And then and then the Warriors traded Bey to the Hawks for, I believe, 4 or 5 second round picks. And then the Warriors used those 4 or 5 picks to trade for Gary Payton II to Portland. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of interesting parts. Each team kind of has their own unique situation. So I'm gonna I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna name each situation, and you can pick which one you want to discuss. One, essentially speaking, the Warriors traded Wiseman for GP2, saves them $7 million in luxury tax this year, 30 million in luxury tax for next year. Um, Detroit basically did not want to pay Sadiq Bey, who's going to be a restricted free agency this summer, so they traded for Wiseman, another second overall pick experiment. Continue to tank,
Almost Bagley.
right?
Yeah.
The Hawks basically trading what's left of their treasure chest, which are all those second round picks, for Sadiq Bey, who's not the same player as Cameron Herder, but basically, if they kept Cameron Herder, they probably wouldn't have needed to trade away 4 or 5 picks for Sadiq Bey, who is better defender than Herder, but more or less you need wing depth, especially for shooting. And then for the Blazers, I think they just realized that they could not compete in the West, especially after the Durant trade. So they also realized that they probably could not re-sign Josh Hart, who we will talk about later. So they basically decided to save some money and do a not a tank, but take a step back to be a little bit more in the lottery. So they traded away Josh Hart and traded back Gary Payton II to the Warriors. They also received Matisse Thybulle, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll
so
go into that later
so
when we talk
which
about it.
so which team do you want to go to first? Because there's a lot of moving parts in this particular trade scenario.
So, yeah. Well, I want to start with James Wiseman getting traded. And how this affects the Warriors. So I think from the Warriors' perspective, it's practically a deal. It's essentially a trade for Wiseman for GP2. Obviously, the Warriors had a chance this offseason to re-sign GP2, but it was just too costly, and so that's why they decided to let him sign elsewhere, which ended up being the Trailblazers. But now that they have the opportunity to get him back, and they realize, or at least they're essentially giving up on Wiseman. Um, Overall, it's what the Warriors needed. They just needed a guard who could play defense, or just players in general. Considering, yeah, they essentially need a guard who played defense, and especially what's unique about GP2 is that he's played with the Warriors last year, so he'll fit seamlessly in the office. Like I don't think there's going to be any transition period for him. The only downside though is that now they have a plethora of guards like with Dante DiVincenzo, Poole, and GP2. I know right now it's fine since Curry's out, but when Curry's back, I'm curious to see how the minutes will be spread out for them. But that's going to be a future problem for the Warriors. So I think the big thing for me is that this ultimately helps the Warriors. It gives them a defender, a perimeter defender they desperately needed. Um, in hopes to, at very least get back to the playoffs at this point, since they're kind of having a rocky season. So that's what I wanted to mention in regards to the Warriors. And on the receiving end, for the Pistons, as you mentioned earlier, I think to some degree it's kind of be more of like an experiment to see what they can get out of Wiseman. Because obviously they've taken a chance on Bagley, where the Kings kind of gave up on him, and the Warriors gave it up on Wiseman. They have a great young point guard in Cunningham, so when he comes back, here's to see how everyone's going to work together. A bunch of recent top picks playing with each other. So we'll see how that comes along. I don't think the Pistons are going to win it anytime soon. So I don't think this is a bad move for them either. Considering they didn't want to as you mentioned earlier, they didn't want to pay Sadiq Bey, and they would rather just take a chance on Wiseman for the time being.
Yeah, so let's well before I go, anything you want to say about the Hawks or the Blazers?
I think you already kind of mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
I'll talk about the Blazers later because I think there's a bit more of a conversation
Okay. Yeah.
on the
So
Blazers.
around the Warriors, Payton helps tremendously, right? I thought it was a mistake for them to let Payton go initially. Now, having said all that, Dante DiVincenzo has played amazingly well. He's he's a better shooter and much better offensive player than Payton, and DiVincenzo pretty good on ball defender as well, and he's also a very smart player. What what makes Payton not just a better, not a better, not I don't want to say a better fit. What makes him a great fit in the Warriors, and it's very similar to Bruce Bowen. Sorry, Bruce Brown on the Nuggets, is that Payton knows how to cut and he knows how to time his cuts in the Warriors offense. Because in the Warriors offense, the ball moves from side to side into the paint, out to the paint, give and goes, all these type of passes left and right. So many unique passes that moves throughout the floor. But Payton knows how to time his cuts. So when all the passes are going on, all the defense is moving left and right, up and down, sideways, upside down, whatever the case may be, he knows how to time his cuts so well that he can get easy dunks and layups. That is what makes Payton fit so well with the Warriors last season, and the Warriors offense. And it's similar to what Bruce Brown does now for the Nuggets. And as great as on-ball defender DiVincenzo is, Payton is one of the best on-ball defenders in the league. Like before he got hurt in the Memphis series last playoffs, they started Payton to guard Morant, right? That's how good of a defender he was. They went small and they did not go small and add a pull into the starting lineup. They went small to add Payton into the starting lineup to guard Morant. That's how good of a on-ball defender that Payton was, right? So you're right. I don't know how the minutes are going to be allocated. Because last season it was Payton and Poole coming off the bench for those guard minutes. Now it's Payton, Poole, and DiVincenzo. Having said that, this assuming health, this will help the Warriors. I don't know how much because the Suns and the Nuggets are like up here right now. This helps them. In terms of the Pistons, I don't really have much more to add.
Yeah,
they just don't want to spend the money on Bay next summer or the summer, I should say. They might as well just take a flyer on Wiseman because they need a big. On the off chance they get Victor this summer, Victor's more of a power forward than a center anyways. It's basically like a low risk, high reward type of trade for the Pistons, more or less.
Also have Bagley for the 4. Like, will depend. I mean, obviously they're gonna start Victor over Bagley, but you know, like, they already have. You know, it adds depth. Worst case, they're just solid role players for them.
Yeah, and then the Hawks, they don't have anything else to trade in terms of picks.
They've mortgaged everything,
so they still couldn't trade Collins. So this is literally their team. That they had, and for the short foreseeable future, they don't have much room to make any type of deals now. So this is essentially their team. So, and now if they decide to keep Bay, they had to pay him this summer as well, right? So we'll see how that goes. And this summer, it's not going to happen, but this upcoming summer will also be Murray's last year. So they had to pay him not this summer, but next summer as well. So they got to start thinking about that as well. And next year is also when Hunter's extension starts that he signed last summer, right? That's when it starts. So if this is the Hawks' team, they have to be willing to pay up because Hunter's extension starts next year. If they pay Bay, his salary is gonna at least double, if not triple. And then they also have to think about, okay, now we have to re-sign Murray, in the summer of 2024 because we traded 3 first-round picks for him, including pick swaps. So the Hawks, not sure what they're doing, but this is their team moving forward.
Yeah, and they're kind of mediocre the way it's currently constructed. I don't think Bay is going to help them significantly. I mean, they'll have a bit more depth. I mean, which is nice, but it's not going to move the needle in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. Before we move on, I've said this like months ago on a separate podcast. I am still of the opinion that they should trade Trey. That was not intentional to Ryan, but because especially with Bay, they have so many so many long, very good rimmer defenders now with Hunter, Murray, Bay, just to name a few. I would see what you can get for Trey, whether that's a quality front court player, whether it's, to get back some assets, get back some prospects, maybe have a conversation with the Nets, get some of their young players. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But because this team moving forward is 5. Okay, there was a stat. I mean, I sent you a stat like 3 days ago where the
most
Hawks
team you can be.
The Hawks, the Hawks were 500 in wins and losses, points scored, points allowed, and all those metrics. Like I forgot what the metric was, but they were literally 500 in every statistical category, right? So
high payroll, so it's not worth it.
Yeah.